Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar today, Simplifying Third-Party Insurance Verification. We've still got a few people logging in, so we're going to take just a moment here, and then we will get started. Thank you. All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Matt Anthony. I'm with Evident and reporting here from rainy Atlanta today. And welcome to the webinar, Simplifying Third-Party Insurance Verification. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists and talk about each of their areas of expertise, and then we're going to go ahead and jump into our content. So first, I'd like to introduce Bob Wyckoff. Bob is an insurance strategist at Evident. He was previously a vice president at Quantum Plate and Guy Carpenter, and he has had a diverse set of responsibilities, including strategy, product management, and business development. So he's seen all parts of the process. I'd like to introduce Chris Donlin, who is a senior software engineer at Evident. And previously, he has been at Pure Cars, Florence Healthcare, and various research roles at Georgia Tech. He has particular experience in applied physics and in machine learning applied to electronic warfare, cybersecurity, and marketing analytics. I'm not sure which of those is the most dangerous. And then finally, I'd like to introduce Trisha Johnston. Trisha is a product owner at Evident. She's also a doctoral candidate in criminal justice and criminology, and has previously held roles including managing editor of Criminal Review. So it's an esteemed group, and we're going to ask them to share some of their knowledge with us. Let me point out, we, of course, are recording the webinar, and it will be available to everyone. But I'd also like to urge you to add your questions during the presentation to the chat box, and we'll respond to them in the Q&A portion at the end of our presentation. All right, so why are we talking about insurance verification? Even though companies have been doing insurance verification forever, insurance premiums are rising fast due to a couple of things. First is uncertainty. The last couple of years, the word unprecedented has been overused in the pandemic, but it really does come from a place of truth. We're seeing a lot of unknowns out there. First is the pandemic itself and its impacts on the economy, on society, with remote work and so on, impacts to businesses, many businesses finding their forecast and futures upended. Second thing is we've seen some civil unrest in many countries. It seems to have abated here in North America, but it did leave many businesses feeling more vulnerable. And of course, it also left their insurers feeling more vulnerable. And then third, climate change has been another variable that many of us expected, but I think maybe some of the narrow ways that we expected it to happen, like sea level rise, have instead resulted in article after article where you say, here's a reason that this place in the Midwest all of a sudden has different weather than it used to, and so on. A lot of uncertainty. So all of these are very hard to control risks. Essentially, they're not controllable. And they seem able to strike anywhere and everyone. And so what that's boiling down to is rapidly rising premiums in the insurance business. So out of all these uncontrollable things, one thing companies can control is whether their third-party partners, whether they be franchises, vendors, suppliers, contractors, whether these third parties have appropriate and required coverage, right? They all have a set of rules that says, you're going to be a third-party partner of ours, then this is the insurance requirements that you have. And yet what we see is that compliance performance against that is very poor. So we're seeing that not many companies have their third parties lined up. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask Bob to shed some light on why this is happening.
Sure, yeah. Where to get started with that one, right? So as you said, insurance verification is really about making sure a vendor or a business partner can actually pay for losses they cause you, right? We need to show proof of insurance before we can register and drive a car. And similarly, with businesses, there are often contractual requirements that obligate business partners to maintain some level of coverage throughout that relationship. Now, companies aren't legally obligated to carry most forms of insurance, so we actually have to verify that they carry at minimum enough to protect us from the risk they expose us to. Now, in a perfect world, this process would support a business's objectives by reducing risk without taking our focus off the big ticket items. But often it's really the opposite. Verification is a slow, painful, complicated back and forth process that mostly results in marginal results, if any. And some of the businesses that we've talked to say it's just not worth the hassle of chasing down every single one of their partners to verify their insurance. And that's for really, I guess, two reasons, right? The first is because nearly 25% of all of the requests that are sent out go unanswered. And then another 25% drop out of the process somewhere along the way. Some of that is driven by relationships. So if you have like a large contract or a strategic supplier, there might not be much you can do besides a quick cost benefit analysis, cross your fingers and hope for the best. But for the rest and for the majority, I think there are probably three major factors that contribute to why verification just doesn't work for most companies. The first is a problem of capacity, right? People have day jobs. Risk managers do a lot more than just wait for certificates to pop out of a fax machine so they can dig in. We're inundated with emails. We get ad hoc requests all the time. We have last minute meetings and we have losses to manage. So the biggest fire is going to get the most water. That means we might have to follow up multiple times to get a response from a business partner. And that's not always going to be possible when you have thousands of vendor partners out there, even if you have a dedicated team working on that problem all day long. And that leads into the second problem, which is really a problem of process. We're still using PDFs. We're still using fax machines. We're handwriting emails to chase up our partners. And then we're manually reviewing whatever they send us, the certificates or the proofs of insurance, which triggers more manual follow-ups when things are wrong or not exactly right. And these are low value added tasks, and they're being done through an inefficient medium that just frankly wastes everyone's time. And in the perfect world, insurance data would be sent in a format that can actually be used to make decisions and manage risk. And I think that the final problem is the problem of simplification. So if you think about something as simple as needing to input credit card numbers on a website to complete a transaction, but your credit card is in another room, right? I actually want the thing that I'm buying, but I'm going to leave those items in my cart for later because I don't want to go get my credit card. Now, imagine what it's like to get a request for an insurance policy that's foreign, complicated, and involved. Then you have things like requirements that are buried in contracts. They're wrapped in excessive legalese. They use terminology that's not universally understood. They don't contemplate that policies aren't the same from one carrier to the next. And the ask isn't always clear or it doesn't make sense at all. So I think those are really the key drivers of why verification doesn't get done today.
Bob, one of the things I heard talking to a company the other day is they said, we don't actually do verification because we have language in our contracts that say that our partners have to verify. Do you run into many organizations that actually don't feel the need, and what's your response to those companies?
Yeah, I don't think it's typical to blanket not verify, but I think there's probably a lot more exposure out there than most people realize if they're not doing a very vigorous job of verifying. So I'll say this. If a vendor can't afford to carry enough insurance to meet the requirements that are being asked of them, how can you expect for them to pay for a loss, right? Are you going to take them to court? How much is that going to cost in legal fees? What if there are multiple companies that are involved in the same loss? You can certainly rely on contractual provisions alone, but you're probably going to find yourself in line with the rest of the creditors picking through the scraps of your former business partner. And think most businesses are really good at what they do, and they shouldn't have to be good at insurance too, and navigating all of these complex processes and verifications. So that's really what companies like ours are doing. We're trying to make this process easier for everyone, so you don't have to rely on contractual provisions alone to protect your company.
So that's interesting. I think one of the things that we see, right, is we do see that a lot of this is being done in a really crude way. But we've been hearing about digital certificates of insurance, or COIs, for a long time. And certainly, we at Evident capture much information digitally as well. But for many of our customers, capturing documents still seems to be a critical part of the process.
Yeah. I think the insurance industry isn't well known for its quick adoption of cutting edge technology. Certificates are not going away anytime soon, and we need to have a combination of processes that meet today's needs, which are these draconian processes, while we're still working to build that digital future. And I think that's going to take some time.
And also, we have current customers who, they're so used to seeing these paper COIs that even though we have a digital platform that can provide this information, perhaps they want the PDF version. They want to be able to take it into a meeting, to pass it off to someone else for whatever reason. Offering them both the PDF paper version that they're used to, as well as the digital platform, gives them the flexibility to handle the COIs or those certificates of insurance as they choose.
All right, thanks. We're going to shift gears here a little bit. So talking more about this digital problem, in a lot of cases, digitization is happening from an existing document. So Chris, you have spent a lot of time, you've led up the efforts here at Evident to tackle this problem of digitizing documents. Can you help us understand why it is that it's been so challenging?
Yeah, so document digitization has been around for a long time. The most analogous problem that we face today has to do with self-driving cars reading road signage. For a self-driving car to read road signage, almost perfect is nowhere near good enough. You want to get it right. You want to be on target and know what the road signage is saying every single time. This means that, in general, we need a human in the loop. So a human in the loop solution involves a couple criteria. You have to be very accurate. Your accuracy has to be so high that you don't actually generate more labor than the human interpreting things on their own. This is the fundamental reason why document digitization is so hard. When you digitize a document and you digitize it slightly incorrectly, you may generate not only a little bit of work to correct the errors, you may actually generate as much or more work to get everything right than you would have had at the outset if the human being just took over and did it themselves. So in order to digitize a document, you have to be quite sophisticated. OCR is not going to get you there. OCR is a utility technology at this point. You might apply it to a page, a free-form text like a crossword puzzle, and you may pull out information. This information is not necessarily usable in an automation pipeline. For an automation pipeline, you have to get it right, and you have to know when you fail. When you fail, you have to fail into human eyes. And you have to fail to human eyes in a way that doesn't create more work than it's worth. So you have to realize value, you have to be efficient, you have to automate what you can automate, and have a human look at what you can't. And you have to do all this accurately and precisely, and you have to do it at scale. All these problems combine to form a fairly hard and sophisticated problem that most organizations probably don't want to deal with. I think the most important takeaway here is that the fundamental problem of document digitization is not character recognition, it is partitioning. You have to partition your text into useful components with useful types that can go into a database with only the information relevant to that particular field, so that you can do processing on top of that. Because the processing on top of your data that you're ingesting is where you realize value. So ultimately, we're dealing with the objective of automatic, efficient value. And in order to achieve that result, we have to go beyond the raw ingredients of document digitization. And that's what we've done here.
That's great. So, how is it that we get ahead of that problem?
So we get ahead of that problem in a couple of ways. It's very similar to the road signage problem. Self-driving cars kind of know what signs are going to look like. When you have the ability to know what something that you're going to ingest looks like, you can set up expectations. With expectations, the entire interplay of technologies and techniques changes. You can now win. You have the ability to take a document, ingest it, and produce a near perfect result and achieve relatively high efficiency. In these two examples, we see relatively low quality to our eyes forms that actually we process very well. Using our techniques, our machine techniques, we're able to take these documents in and pull out meaningful information almost 100% of the time with near perfect accuracy for many of the fields, and a good fine dividing line between what we know we've parsed accurately and what we haven't. So we know what humans have to take a look at. In fact, our problem is not bad pictures or bad scans. Our problem is actually, at where we are right now, compressed images that have been reconstructed, images that have been compressed for email, sent across the internet, and pulled out in a reconstructed format, tend to have small artifacts and pixelation properties throughout the image that make it hard for our techniques to find purchase. But this in general is not a weakness. It's just the image quality can degrade to a level that only, I mean, we can imagine how bad images can be. However, that's it. That's what we're dealing with. Anything that comes in, we can ingest, we can process, pull information out. Worst case, it's been compressed to a pixelated form that maybe we pull out not quite as much as we would have hoped, but we still do quite well.
All right, thanks. That's so. Let me shift gears here a little bit. That when I think about like tough technical issues like Chris is talking about, we also see kind of some more basic problems, still with kind of their own secret hidden technical aspects to them. But Tricia, can you talk a little bit about what we've done to actually improve communications and how much of an impact that's having?
Absolutely. Yeah. So while there are some really technical issues that insurance verification has, it's also problematic just asking your insureds for their certificate of insurance. It may seem like something that is common sense. You put it in the contract that they have to provide you one. You expect that they will do that. Unfortunately, that's not always the case, as I'm sure if you have an insurance verification program, you probably already know this. Engagement is really critical because you have to actually ask the person for them to be able to, respond to that request. And so this is just the first hurdle. We mentioned in our report that about 25% of requests for proof of insurance go unanswered. So not only do you have a quarter of your insureds unlikely to answer, but then the remaining 75% of those, there are issues with misunderstanding requirements. It may cause people to drop out. They might get the email and they might say, I don't know what you're asking me for, and just leave it at that. Maybe they send an email back, but you don't have the capacity to regularly check these emails. And so you can't, get right back to them while they're thinking about it. All of these are issues that are going to compound, and, it might be a one-off problem one day that turns into, half or more of your insureds, and now you're scrambling and wondering what to do. So really, we boiled it down to three main things: making sure there's clear communication of requirements, making sure that there's sufficient processes for supporting and managing the relationships, and then just adhering to best practices. And so with this, we have come up with an engagement philosophy here at Evident. And our engagement philosophy really starts with branding and relevance. And so what we do is we want to make sure your insureds recognize who the email is coming from. So even though it's our platform that's sending the email, it's branded to you. It's got your DBA name. It's got your logo, your colors, everything is coming from you. And we make sure that we do that so that your insureds right away, they know, okay, this is coming from my company. I'm going to respond, or I'm going to look at it, which sometimes can be the first problem, right? Not only that they don't respond, but that they don't look at it. And so the second part is clarity. And this is probably one of the most important parts, especially when you're talking about a subject such as insurance. As Bob mentioned, it's a really dense subject, and a lot of people don't, even in the insurance industry, don't fully understand what the terminology means. And so you can't necessarily expect yourself or your insured population to fully grasp some of the concepts. And so it's really important to make sure that the requirements are outlined in very clear and precise ways, so that way your insured population knows, okay, this is what I need. And they can either relay that to their insurance broker, or maybe they can understand it well enough to say, okay, I think I have a COI on hand that actually demonstrates all of these things. And so making sure that there's clarity is not an easy task, but it's the most essential. And that's something that we've really focused on here at Evident, is how do we communicate these requirements in a way that is understandable, but also sufficient? Because if you don't do it clearly enough, excessively enough, you may find that your insureds, maybe they respond, but if it's not clear, they're unlikely to respond in a way that leads to compliance. And then lastly, automation, notifications, and reminders. And so our platform allows you to set and forget. And this is really nice for reducing administrative overhead and just the burden on you, because you don't have to worry about, did I send that email? Did I send a follow-up email? When was the last time, maybe something's expiring? Did I make sure to send an email before it expires? Our platform handles all of this for you. And in doing that, we also have fine-tuned our reminder cadences. So that way, instead of just plaguing your insured population with email after email after email, you're doing it in a way that aligns with evidence-based email strategies. So we know, okay, insureds are likely, or anyone who's receiving an email, right, is likely to most likely to respond to the second email they get. And that second email should, come at least 1 day, or at least 2 days usually, after the first email. And so we've really applied these strategies, and we've seen great response from them. Our insured populations that are the customers we have that utilize these practices were much better off from doing so. And it's something that we're excited about. It's not something you think it's an email. You just know how to send an email, but it's really not that simple. And we've done a lot of work to make sure that our customers are set up for success.
Okay, thanks, Tricia. So Bob, you talked about kind of the current state, but how do things look going forward?
Sure, yeah. I think the industry is absolutely moving toward a future where data is exchanged more efficiently and effectively. I think it has to, right? Today's processes aren't sustainable and they're not getting the job done. We just heard 2 great examples of how that's being done throughout the industry from Chris and Tricia. And our platform is actually tackling this problem from both sides. So we're building better tools to help companies do all these things faster and more effectively. And we're also building relationships within the insurance industry and connecting to data sources so we can create a process that makes it far easier for everyone to understand, achieve, and demonstrate compliance. So that means tens of thousands of recurring interactions are streamlined, complicated and nuanced decisions are automated. You're using far fewer resources to manage a scalable process that dramatically improves compliance outcomes. And then from that process, you can actually get actionable real-time data about the exposure within your third-party networks. And to me, that's a bright future, and it's one that helps to improve your competitive advantage while also doing a better job of protecting the castle.
All right, let us jump in with the few minutes we have left to a couple of the questions that we have received. So let me start off. What role do we think regulation plays in insurance verification? We talked about a lot of aspects, but I think that's a big one. It's a good question there.
Yeah, so regulation plays a huge role. There really isn't a federal regulation, but each state has their own set of regulations surrounding certificates of insurance, not even just insurance, but specifically certificates of insurance. So they have language on what is a certificate of insurance, what constitutes one. They also talk about what can be included, who can provide one. Lots and lots and lots of regulations surrounding these. That's the reason why forms and organizations like Accord or ISO are such heavy hitters in the industry, because they've been kind of accepted. They've gone through this form process to be accepted, and this is really kind of why we've been so slow to be able to move away from these forms, right? This is just one piece of the puzzle, is that regulation moves slowly. Insurance can move slowly, but the tech industry, as we've seen in other other areas, is really kind of disrupting that. And this is one where we will in real time see how you can keep up with what's going on and how we can work with those regulations.
So I think one of the interesting things there is, there again, we talked about earlier how there's lots of talk about the digital COI and that sort of thing. But once regulators are involved, any change is going to happen somewhat slowly. So I guess, and certainly we do this, you need to be able to straddle both worlds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Tricia. So I bet this one's going to go to Chris. So are machine learning and/or AI helping solve the problem? Chris, I think you're on mute.
There we go. Yes, I was on mute. The document digitization solution we have is a composition of machine learning techniques. We build a system. The system functions as expected. We've experimentally determined the error rates. We understand it backwards and forwards. It's an engineered solution. Machine learning tools are tools in the tool bag. We've assembled something that functions. What you see is what you get, and we can approach a variety of documents. Right now, we're specialized to Accord 25s. So yes, absolutely. We have machine learning. It is an integral part of this solution, but it's not. We don't have many of the limiting factors that a machine learning solution might imply.
Okay, but that does seem like it would help reduce errors, which is a bit of a hidden problem in the insurance verification space.
It absolutely helps reduce errors. Machine learning allows you to get an edge. You want to go as far as you can with your mind, and then machine learning allows you to go a step further across a wider variety of inputs than you could ever have a program for as a human. And so we were able to handle a large variety of inputs and in an automation pipeline, and fail seamlessly to human eyes when and if we need to. Machine learning is involved at every step of that process.
All right, thanks. So Bob, I think this is in reference to something you mentioned. Can you talk more about connected coverage? Is this going to require an industry standard? What does that really mean?
Sure. Yeah. So there are really two ways we interact with an insurance policy. We have a claim, or we need to prove that we have a policy. And there are plenty of awesome companies out there who are doing things in the claim space, but there's not as many focus on the problem of prove you have insurance. So what we're calling our connected coverage initiative, it's really a key part of what we consider to be the most dramatic service improvement to verification in decades. And the goal is to fully automate the verification process by pulling policy information directly from systems of record and then monitoring that policy status in real time. So from an insurance standpoint, that eliminates the need to undertake today's cumbersome processes that we've just been talking about, while providing the requester with some certainty that the coverage exists and it's active in real time. To the second part of the question, I think it was about an industry standard. echoing what Tricia said, there's still going to be legal consideration about what constitutes an acceptable proof of insurance, and that varies by state. So what I see, not so much of a standard, but more of an industry norm for the trading and the sharing of data through a connected insurance ecosystem. And like companies that adopt like modern verification platforms like ours, industry partners that join that ecosystem will create their own competitive advantage by improving how they're able to serve their policyholders, by understanding their own risks better, and ultimately by unlocking growth opportunities that have historically been difficult to identify.
All right, thank you. There's actually one here that I can jump in on. So, do you currently have any franchisers that use your system? And we do. In fact, some of the largest ones in the country and the world are using the system. Actually an early and strong partner for us that's really helped us make the solution better and better. One other set, we actually got multiple questions asking about specific liability insurance for different industries and types of folks. So Tricia, I guess I'm going to reframe this question as, what do we do when we get into like a very specific industry? Of all things, we work with massage therapists. Mm-hmm. And how do we handle liability insurance conditions, and what is the insurance for that, and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've typically seen is we'll have customers who come to us with their kind of agreements, that their contracts that they have with their insured population. And then we might, look through them, talk with the customer and say, okay, I see you have, insurance requirements, X, Y, and Z, and, okay, we'll verify those. But also we're here to serve kind of as your insurance experts. And so massage therapy, for example, you're looking at professional liability insurance primarily. You may be looking at wanting some additional coverage with general liability insurance, as well as sexual abuse and molestation policies. And so these are really common ones that we've seen in the massage therapy atmosphere. And we would be able to guide you through what does it mean, with those three policies, if you choose those three, which endorsements, which coverages underneath, that are within that do you need to be best protected, especially in something, a job that is more likely to result in claims, for example. So, we serve as your insurance experts to help guide you through what you want to have your insured population, what you want them to present.
Yeah, no, but if I can add on to that, I think ultimately the platform's designed so that whatever the customer decides are their requirements are what we're enforcing against. What we do is we find ourselves consulting and making recommendations. And now we've actually built into the product the capability to test and see, if I add a new requirement, how many of the third parties are going to be impacted by that? Is that going to increase their total cost? Is that going to, make a bunch of third parties suddenly not compliant? So really helping people model those requirements, because, you said this earlier, and Bob talked about the requirements as well. Getting those right is very critical to having a successful program. You don't want too much. You don't want too little.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's an important part as well. So I've got one other question, and Tricia, this might be for you too. You're the lucky winner. If all emails and automations have been sent out and a response from the client has not been received and their COI is going to expire, what happens at that point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if all of what we would call, we've got different notification types, right? And so one is this initial email. So if we've sent out the initial email and they don't respond, they've gone through all the sets of reminders, which you would get to set. So you decide, do you want there to be 10 reminder emails, or do you want there to be 20 reminder emails? It's completely up to you, although we do guide you with our best practices. We would never suggest 20. But that said, if they don't respond, then they would be considered non-compliant. Similarly, if the expiration email goes out, and again, you can set whether you send that out 30 days prior to expiration. We suggest doing it 15 days prior to expiration, because that's when people typically renew their policies. Or even if the policy has expired and you send them out and there's no response, again, that insured would be considered non-compliant. And we consider them non-compliant for non-response because ultimately you have no idea if they have coverage or not, right? You wouldn't want to consider them compliant because that's going to expose you to a lot of risk, especially, considering the people typically less likely to respond are going to be more likely not to have the correct coverage, right? I think that's fair to assume. And so you would consider them non-compliant. But what our platform allows you to do is when you see all of the insureds in what we call the insurance portal, you'll see which ones are compliant, non-compliant. You can filter accordingly. And those who didn't respond, you'll be able to see that they didn't respond, and that's why they're being listed as non-compliant. And then you can send them additional emails that will have that the same kind of reminder cadence as the initial email that gets sent, so that you can continue to send them emails beyond that. It's not just like they're non-compliant and they're non-compliant forever. You can continue to follow up.
All right. Okay. So we're actually over time here. So I am going to thank our presenters. So Chris, Tricia, Bob, thank you so much for your time. And I also want to thank all the attendees. So thank you for coming. Hopefully this has been useful. There will be an archive recording of this that you will be able to access. So we'll be in touch on that. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone and say good day.
Thanks, everyone.